Well, welcome everybody. I hope you're having a good morning or afternoon, depending on where you are, or it could be early evening if you're from another time zone. My name is Bob Doppelt. I coordinate the ITRC, and I want to welcome you all to this community practice. We're going to do a brief round of introductions here in a second, but just to let you know the agenda. After introductions, we're going to talk about some of the common struggles that we have heard from people who are trying to organize a transformational resilience coordinating network, what they've struggled with. And then we're just going to talk a little bit about them to get your views and hear what other people are saying about it. But then in about a half hour from now, we're going to have a panel discussion. I'm going to interview Javane Skiba, Robin Saenger, and Becky Turner who run resilience networks to get their views on these issues. And then we'll talk a little bit about what I call the ladder of engagement, how people can organize these resilience networks and run them. And then we'll close the community practice today with a discussion of get your views on the best way to organize and run community practices in the future. So with that, why don't we do a very quick round of introductions. I'll call out your name, and if you would just sort of share your name, where you're located, and we'll go on because we have a bunch of people on the line. So Reb McKenzie.
Reb McKenzie, Claremont, New Hampshire, and great to be here. Thank you.
Becky.
I'm Becky Turner. I'm located in Walla Walla, Washington.
Great. Stephanie.
I'm Stephanie, and I'm in Edmonton, Alberta.
Great. Michael.
Hi, I'm Michael James Duramo, and I'm in Richmond, Virginia.
Javane.
Good afternoon. My name's Javane Skiba, and I am here in Wilmington, North Carolina.
Right. I hope I get this right. Lacey Depina.
Hi, yes, I'm Lacey and I'm from Rhode Island.
Great, welcome. Charlene.
I'm Charlene from Resilience High Point and in Guilford County, North Carolina, Greensboro.
Great, welcome. Let me see if I can get this on. Dixie. Can you hear me, Dixie? You might be muted. Well, let's go on and we'll come back to Dixie. Lydia.
Hi, I'm Lydia Ledgerwood. I'm coming to you from Portland, Oregon, and I work with Multnomah County Emergency Management.
Great, welcome. Chelsea.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Chelsea Kunkel. I am here in Chester County, Pennsylvania, which is right outside of Philadelphia.
Maria Jose.
Hi, my name is Maria Jose. I'm here from Providence, Rhode Island. Thank you for having us.
Welcome. Let's see. So did I miss anybody? Dixie, can you hear me now? Can you introduce yourself? And then we'll go back to Bill. So Dixie isn't there. So Bill.
Hi, Bill All from Spokane, Washington.
Great. And Christy.
Hi, Christy, Vancouver, Washington.
Great. Christian.
Hey, folks. Christian, trauma-informed Oregon, Portland, Oregon.
And Jesse.
Hey, everyone. Jesse Kohler. I'm in Washington, D.C.
Great. Did I miss anybody? If so, just sort of.
I'm also here.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Ibelis and Julio is joining us soon. And also Maria Jose Aliceli are working with us on Sabaté Lab and Sabaté Foundation.
Great. Welcome.
From Rhode Island.
Hi, my name is Dixie Morgese. I'm from Daytona Beach, Florida.
Great. And I saw somebody else join us just a second ago. Chelsea, have you introduced yourself?
Yes, I've introduced myself. Sorry.
Okay, Carolyn. I'm sorry, Carolyn. You just a brief introduction. You can. Okay, we'll come back. All right, well, there might be more people joining us as we go on, and we'll just ask you if you're just coming on and you don't have a chance, just as Christian, I think should have posted in chat, post your name, where you're from, et cetera, just so everybody gets to know each other, because we want to really dive into this. So many of you are involved with you're involved with a prospective transformational resilience coordinating network already. And if not, you're considering it. We have asked everybody who's involved with this work what kind of issues you have had as you move forward trying to organize a TRCN. And what we have heard back, I'm sort of summarizing them into 4 common themes. And what I'd like to do is get your reactions and thoughts about it. But the common struggles or challenges people are having relate to sort of 4 issues. One is they talk to people about forming or participating in a steering committee, but people say their plate is full and they're overwhelmed with other issues. So it's a struggle to get them to engage. Other people say, or sometimes they hear multiple issues like this, that they're struggling with funding cuts given the Trump actions, et cetera, and or other issues. And so it's hard to engage in this work. Still, a third issue we're hearing is that it's been difficult to talk about climate change related issues because of concerns people have about political polarization and other issues. They don't want to get into it. And related to that, fourth is that it's difficult to get people to discuss mental health issues and psychosocial issues, because it's always difficult to talk about those issues anyway with many people, but also because of so many other issues pressing today. So that's taking a lower priority. We've heard some other issues that arose from people, but that's sort of a general sense. So before we dive in to hear from some of the people who are really on the ground doing this work already, I'd like your feedback. Any of you that would like to share are you experiencing any or all of those kinds of issues? And what any other issues that I didn't share that are really stand out for you that are standing in the way of moving forward in trying to organize a TRCN? So anybody that wants to just unmute yourself and speak up.
This is Dixie. I think one of the things I run into is that it's almost like everyone sees climate as a separate issue from all the other issues, and it is not. And one really good example was how, I guess from a government standpoint, they said we need to take climate out of the DOJ. Why is there a piece of climate, not DOJ, Department of Defense? And it was so interesting to hear that discussion, because it's like, well, because troops can't train in 105-degree heat, and certain defense equipment can't operate in extreme weather, or things like that, where you could tell, like, the silos, I guess maybe is one way to say it, that each discipline seems to have its silo, because that's how our funding was designed. If you do homeless, you get homeless money. If you do mental health, you get behavioral health money. If you do this, you get this kind of money. And to try to really help people understand that every one of those silos should somehow have a bridge that connects the climate issue, I think is a challenge. And I'd love to see somebody come out with a real simple, like, infographic that could show you, like a 5-year-old, this is why, no matter what discipline you're in, climate matters to you. Anyway, I'll be quiet.
Right, that's very interesting and right on target. Anybody else have that kind of experience? Bill, go ahead.
A lot of what you said we're experiencing here in Spokane. The other piece is the enviro groups and the city and educational institutions are focusing on the physical aspects of climate change adaptation and not the psychosocial. And so we're like, it's all important, they say, but well, we got to do smoke and fire and physical infrastructure stuff. And yeah, if you do that, that's great. But we don't have time. That's kind of the subtext.
Thank you. let me just very briefly say that when I used to run the University of Oregon Climate Leadership Initiative, and we organized the American Society of Adaptation Professionals, which still exists, the largest professional association for climate adaptation people. And it was that's what they thought there too. So that's been around for a long time. We just do external physical thing. They don't realize the impacts on people and how you engage people, and how if people do not have resilience and mental wellness, they can't do the physical stuff very well. So that siloing is there. Other thoughts, comments? Just speak up. How many of you have been experienced people struggling with feeling overwhelmed because of what's going on with the federal government or other issues, and so not able to participate yet in this, or not be able to sort of concentrate on? Has that been an issue for anybody? I see Lydia,
Yeah.
hands up. Anything you can share?
Oh,
Or
I mean,
Reb?
just yes, it's happening federally, it's happening locally. At the local government level, we're looking at doing as much work, if not more, with fewer people and fewer resources. And so, yeah, anytime there's an introduction of a new group or a new initiative or another facet, which is important, I definitely personally feel the overwhelm, and engaging with our community partners. It's always on their mind, even before all of this change. It was an issue, and now for sure. So yeah, that's definitely a part of everything we're doing right now, is taking that into consideration.
And do you think it's slowing down the work you're doing because of that? That is, it's harder to get people to engage in resilience networks or other activities because they're trying to deal with these other issues.
I mean, I think it's always been challenging because, especially like from the perspective of local government, we're always asking the communities to do more or to participate in all of these processes. We're siloed ourselves, and trying to ask, even with a more collective voice. That's always been overwhelming for our community partners, but certainly now, where the things that we hold to be important are now being, the words are being dashed off of lists and targeted for, I mean, that's, yeah, there's so much work to be done always. And now I think I'll just say again, it's more, it's the same amount and more with less, and no real relief on the horizon. So yeah, I mean, I don't know how true it actually is, but it feels true. And so it affects people's ability to commit.
Thank you. I want to hear from others, but I just want to make one quick comment. Your last comment could be very important. The distinction between what is really happening and what people feel. And is there a way that you could help people distinguish or clarify the two? Because it might be a way to engage people more, to help them understand deal with that stress. That might not be all encompassing in terms of the actual work, but it's something. I saw Reb had her hand up before. Reb?
I was just agreeing that yes, the overwhelm of our communities are really having trouble. One of the things that I was thinking of in addition to that, though, is when I approach community members to talk about transformational resilience, there's like this gap between when I introduce it and how I involve them. And so that gap feels really like I've lost some interest or some momentum. So that's a problem that I have.
Thank you. Anybody else experience something like that? Speak up if you'd like to. Let me go back and ask for your thoughts on anybody who has experienced that. You're all dealing with siloed funding, siloed programs. Our mindsets are, we're trained in certain things, so we're siloed in that way. We don't connect with other things. Thoughts on how to, have you experienced that siloing, but thoughts on how to overcome that? Any experience you've had that have given you insights as to overcoming that kind of siloing? and anybody can speak up.
Well, I just think I put it in the chat, but reliance on government at this point is probably not an option because it's volatile and it's not stable. And so it creates a potential opportunity for us to really focus on local, because I wake up and I walk outside, the sun is still shining, my plants are still growing, you know what I mean? And the government is kind of up there doing whatever it does, but my local environment and my local connections are still intact, right? So figuring out how to find local solutions and not rely on government, I think is a great conversation to have, because I think this whole movement of being resilient is not focusing on government. It's really focusing on what's immediately around you and who's immediately around you and how we can all support one another. So I don't know, that's my comment about that, is just I can still walk over to my neighbor and say, hey, you doing okay today? You know, so anyway.
Thank you. That's right on.
Following that line, connecting with people like in the community, I think in the state or people that are around us, I think that's helping, and also being creative. Like the person was saying, not just depending on federal or any government, but on organization that supported us before, and then staying in contact with them. And being creative, thinking in new ways on finding funds and connecting with people that are here close to us and that have more experience on some fundings and all activities to collaborate together. So I've been noticing that all those things are happening in general, but also locally. We have been getting closer to each other somehow, and I think that's helping.
Thank you. Other thoughts?
I have a thought. I appreciate our need for local and self-reliance, and I think we need to reach out to government and from a solid base, as not ignore it, because not because we need all the resources, but because part of our social fabric is tied up with a government system. And so if we create more polarization between us and them, I think that's really a problem, especially local government can find allies there and not rely on them. I think there's a experience of the transition town movement from years past was government can be an ally across the globe, not just in the US, if we start from our own base. So just wanted to put that out.
Thank you. And I think it's a very important point that government and policy, public policies, are going to be vital to build resilience and to address the climate ecosystem biodiversity crisis. But it could be that we have to have the timing right, the methods right to do that now, given what's happening at the federal level, and therefore how that's trickling down to the state and local level. So think about that very carefully. But the more you can engage local government officials in the process, the more powerful it'll be. But just understand that they're under certain kind of pressures too. So you have to think through that very carefully.
Right. I think that politicizing it is a moot point at this intersection, because then it becomes seen as resistance as opposed to support. And I think the more we can reach out to our policymakers at all levels and show the desire to support. So we just had wildfires in South Carolina. We had all the climate issues in North Carolina. We had the wildfires in California. So it doesn't matter whether you're a red state or a blue state, this is affecting everyone, and the policymakers know it because their constituents ask for help. So I just feel like, yes, getting policymaker support through good policy is important, but making sure that it doesn't end up being presented as politicized. Because I think that people go, okay, are you foe or friend? When you're approaching a legislator, it's like, are you part of the resistance or are you a friend? And at this point, a lot of people are in the resistance end. So we want to support you. I think if the message is we have groups of people that want to support our policymaking folks in knowing how to respond better after a climate event, I think is the way to frame it. So I think it's absolutely right. We need to engage them and we need to make sure that policy's on our side, but I think we need to do it as a friend. And I think we also need to do it in a way that makes them feel safe because they have their own trauma, right? Anyway.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And I think what I'm hearing, just if I can summarize and make sure I got it right, is that you focus on practical, real issues, real practical issues in the community that people are dealing with. And that just gets you into the climate crisis. You don't have to name it that, you're just dealing with heat events, smoke events, wildfires, whatever it might be. Those are real events that you can't hide from. And just deal with those events and worry about, the causes of them and all that at some other point. When you get policymakers to focus on those, how do we help people build resilience for that, et cetera, then you will build that momentum from the bottom up. So it's just something to consider. How can you do that best as possible? I see some good comments here in chat also from Reb and some others. Any other thoughts on how to overcome the siloing? What kind of siloing you're experiencing, not only between government and the residents, but yourself? Do you feel siloed yourself? Does your training and your background sort of prevent you from engaging in certain issues or seeing connections with certain issues in any way? Any thoughts?
Yeah, I think a lot of behavioral health and resilience spaces are really trying to stay apolitical as to not receive less resources than they're already getting, and that's making climate hard to connect. And then already in general, just when talking about climate and a multi-system, like global approach and the way we have to, it definitely feeds that overwhelm. One thing that I've seen that felt really effective in Richmond was the creation of like neighborhood assembly groups. And it started kind of with trying to build a Richmond-based assembly, but then when there was a call for everyone to fit into their local neighborhood, find other people in their neighborhood and then connect and create smaller assemblies from there. And then, and talk about housing, medical, whether there's community gardens and food in their neighborhoods, et cetera, and kind of bring it down. And then there were skill shares and things like that to then help bring it back up to that, like to our city council and things like that and onward. And so that felt really, whenever I was there, it reminded me of this work and it felt like what I felt really effective.
Thank you. That's basically what a resilience coordinating council can do. Or you could call it a mutual aid network. There's different versions of it. What the only difference really between that and a TRCN, these focuses, we need to keep this going over the long term because the climate crisis is going to go on for decades and get worse. Whereas many of these other focuses, they focus on a specific issue, and then when that issue is addressed, they dissipate. So that's one of the issues. We need that ongoing, permanent social infrastructure established in communities. But it might take a while to do that. You might have to start with different approaches, deal with different issues. People see successes and then they go on. Any other thoughts, comments? I want to start doing some interviews here, but any other reactions, thoughts? Okay, is Robin on the line? I don't see Robin yet. Robin Saenger. Well, when she joins us, we'll get into it. Before we go on, I know a couple of people have just joined us and have not had a chance to introduce themselves. Can you, if you have not introduced yourself, can you just very briefly say who you are and where you're from? Anyone can do it.
Sure, my apologies. My name's Alice Bush. I use she, her pronouns. I work for Multnomah County Emergency Management. I apologize. We have layoffs going on in our agency, and so I'm trying to do double duty and pay attention to both.
Thank you. And that's exactly the issues we were just talking about. So, Alice, who else?
Hi, I'm
go ahead.
Ida Wright from Florida, work with the Department of Health, and it's a pleasure to be here. And I was going to chime in, but yes, we've seen stress from everyone, and not just about employment, just about where we are as a country and where we're going.
Thank you.
And hello, my name is Carolyn Yoder. I'm from Harrisonburg, Virginia, and I'm a psychotherapist. I also do a climate training, wellness training, mental health training, psychosocial training. And I'm on a couple of local green committees, and we are talking about, and we're just at the very beginning, what would it look like to have a mutual aid program of some sort that supports small farmers in climate protecting adaptation of their operations, so that we are ensuring a food supply for the future.
Thank you. And that is one of the things the TRCN can do. They can, you engage people in those issues, and then you do that, you help them understand and build mental wellness and resilience at the same time. So anybody else who has not introduced themselves yet?
Hi, I'm Erica Littlewood. I work for Whatcom County Health and Community Services. I'm the public health educator in climate. And Whatcom County is the farthest northwest county in Washington State. So we border British Columbia on the north. And I just got back from visiting my son in Connecticut at 1 a.m. this morning. So I'm a little slow this morning, but glad to be here listening to everyone. Thanks.
Thanks. Anyone else?
Yes, hi, my name is Abigail Pedazzo. I use she, her pronouns. I work for a local organization in my area of Southern California, based in the Inland Empire. I'm a Stop the Hate program coordinator for my organization, so I focus a lot on anti-discrimination work. But my organization also does mental health and public health advocacy in our area. I was actually introduced to the TCRN model through one of my previous consultants from an API coalition that we have in our behavioral health department. So a lot of the things that you guys have been talking about, oh, she just popped up. A lot of the things that you guys are talking about, it really connects with the work that I do. So to be here and listening in.
Thanks. Okay, well, if you haven't introduced yourself yet, can you just share your name and where you're from and what you do in chat? Because we're going to move on. We only have a short period of time to do this. We invited three real experienced practitioners in the resilience field to join us to sort of give their views on these questions we've been asking. And I just want to introduce Javane Skiba, who is the director of the New Hanover County Resiliency Task Force in North Carolina. Robin Saenger, I saw Robin came on, who's the founding director of Peace for Tarpon in Tarpon Springs, Florida, which was designated as one of the first trauma-informed community in the U.S. And Becky Turner, who's the director of community engagement with the Community Resilience Initiative in Walla, Washington. So we've got different perspectives, different geographic areas. And I want to thank you all for joining us. I'm going to ask, just to sort of do this as an interview style, I'll ask the same question to all three of you and then go on to the next question. And you've heard some good responses to these questions already, but we just like your sense of this. So I'll start with Javane, if you're willing. Your thoughts on how to engage people in your resilience network and in resilience work when they feel that their plate is full and there's a lot of other issues going on, so they sort of feel overwhelmed. So your thoughts on that?
We can
We can hear. There you go.
Okay, great. Thanks for that question, Bob. And again, I'm Skiba with the New Hanover County Resiliency Task Force. We really work to make sure we are convening people regularly. Our pillars, the pillars of our work are connection, education, and action. So what we try to do is really lay that foundation of bringing people together regularly. This does help with engagement, but it's also complex. A lot of the folks that we get coming to our meetings might not necessarily be the decision makers within certain organizations. So not only are we bringing folks together, we are trying to equip them to actually advocate up. One of our primary ways of reaching people in the community is providing for the provider, so to speak. So we prioritize and use resilience training strategically to make sure that we are supporting first responders, healthcare workers, educators with basic body-based resilient skills in hopes that they are able to better take care of themselves using evidence-based practices, but also disrupt them re-traumatizing the people that they serve. Because of this strategy, we've been able to train over 6,000, nearly 7,000 folks in our county of all backgrounds to build these resilient skills, to create a common language of resilience. So that education piece is vital too. It really allows folks to have a grasp of something tangible that we can do when we're trying to respond to disasters, to adverse community events. But again, keeping folks engaged around that, I feel there's a constant level set. Not only are you making sure that folks are equipped with the skills, but you're also tying it back to how it could possibly change their practice, bringing that trauma-informed, resilience-focused way of doing things into the work that they're doing. That's why I mentioned that advocating up so that decision makers can actually make those changes and still be engaged. We're talking about folks who are, and I think, Bob, you touched on it in your question, overwhelmed and pretty, I would say, overcommitted because they are those senior level leadership in a lot of the organizations that are a part of our task force. So we've got to equip people to be able to continue to advocate in their spaces and know how to generalize the information that they learn within the task force. It's not just personal resilience, although that is what we care about. We care about individual resilience, but this is building up the communities well in blue skies time, so that when we encounter disasters, for us, Florence was a pivotal time, and we are in North Carolina. We've had lots of large hurricanes, but what was deceiving about Florence was that it was not. It was a Category 1 hurricane, but it sat and sat and sat and sat. And so that level of destruction, a lot of folks just weren't ready because we thought we had weathered storms that were much worse before. And this proved to be different because of just the weather, the pattern of it staying for so long, which was very unusual. So using that pivotal moment, kind of gave people a focal point, but we still have to come back to the blue skies time. It's not just about responding after a disaster. It's about being able to be okay and well and resilient ahead of time, so that we can be our best selves when those things happen, so that we are not re-traumatizing each other. I think I branched out a lot in that
It's all right.
answer,
It's all right.
but I think just going back to that is what we have to do regularly to keep people engaged, kind of the why.
Thank you very, very much. Very insightful. And you're absolutely right. We've got to build resilience ahead of time and wellness so that they can maintain that during the disasters and afterwards. So thank you. Robin Saenger is the founding director again from Peace for Tarpon, Tarpon Springs, Florida. Robin, any thoughts you might have on how to engage people in the work you're doing down in Peace for Tarpon and other Peace for communities that feel overwhelmed and feel like they can't engage in this kind of work? So, Robin?
Well, one of the things we're just formed is a new partnership with the for-profit organization. But to backstep a little bit, Jivanette, did I say that correctly?
Javanay.
Javanay, you're absolutely correct when you say the basis of everything is connection. You have to have those connections. And even when people are overwhelmed, if there's a core of safety in knowing they're in a community that's connected, or a community, whether it's like-minded people, differently minded people, it doesn't matter. If they can find a core unification in that connection, that's where everything builds on it. And we find that unless that's formed, it's more difficult to share information. So we do different types of things throughout the community, but we work with agencies, we work with organizations, our city, police, fire, large child welfare agencies, but our deep roots go into the community from the beginning. We knew that we wanted community members to be a part of this experiment and evolution, and that has really served us well. That there's a constancy there, there's a connection there that's pretty interesting. So we've done, things like mental health first aid and different trainings, resiliency trainings. One of our new things is a woman. So I've spoken at our Rotary maybe 5 times, and this is an example of how everything takes time. I've spoken at our Rotary over the years many times, and one of the members is an engineer. She's an astrophysicist engineer. I, on the other hand, am an artist. So we couldn't really figure each other out for a couple of years, and it was just kind of like, okay. And but recently she came up and she said, I think I found a way for us to work together. And she has a for-profit organization called Alpha Umi that does skills building things they work mainly with colleges, big, agencies and hospitals and things like that. But she said that she would like to partner with us to provide resiliency building trainings throughout the community to our community groups, whether it's a neighborhood association or anybody. You get 15 people together, we'll have a training for them. And Peace for Tarpon will bring in that trauma piece. So it's like you understand how to build your brand, or how to have difficult conversations, or how to create boundaries, safe boundaries, but with the understanding that part of our responses also are interwoven with our own personal trauma histories and how active those trauma histories are and how they've been addressed. Everybody's super, super overwhelmed right now. I'm in the state of Florida, which is, it's like its own little island in a way. I mean, people, many of my friends are leaving the state, whether to other countries or just to places where they can be free to exist as they choose. So there's that as well. So we have climate change. We also just went through 2 hurricanes back to back, 2 weeks apart. So when we had our community convening after that, it was basically just to sit and be together and not really no agenda, no, we're going to fix you and we'll fix each other. It was just, let's be together. And what came out of that was absolutely incredible. But it was a small group work. And I find that a lot of our most successful things are done in small group, in more intimate settings where there's a sense of safety and connection with the community. I think this is a good stopping point for me, Bob.
Thanks, Robin. Yeah, again, very, very insightful. And I think the small group focus is so important, and connection. That's the key, community connection. So thank you. We'll come back to another question in a second, but Want to first hear from Becky Turner, the Director of Community Engagement with the Community Resilience Initiative in Walla Walla, Washington. Becky, your thoughts on how to engage people that are overwhelmed, that feel hopeless sometimes. How do you keep people engaged or try to get them engaged when they might not feel like they can?
I propose it as self-care. I talk about how building resilience is self-care and addressing climate is community care. It all is connected to the same thing. And if you find yourself with a plate that's too full, what we can do through building resilience is give you a bigger plate. We're not here to take things off of the plate. I know that they're going to continue piling on, but what we're talking about really is attempting to increase capacity, attempting to increase that bandwidth that people have. There were a couple things that Javane had said specifically about building resilience and connection helps steel us against the future. And that's really the first steps of this. We start, at least in Walla Walla, the strategies that seem to work with us is starting with a hyper local fixation, talking specifically about who's in the room, and then what agencies are represented in the room. What are the individual things that we're experiencing? And then branching out to community. We don't get very broad in our conversations because what we found is if we start talking about policy at the federal level or pollution happening in other countries, we find that people get really overwhelmed. And that is when that full plate seems to be an insurmountable thing. So what we do is focus specifically on what can we do to increase our local capacity. And we are hoping that through the power of co-regulation, we are able to affect change on the next circles. That it's really kind of those rings of the tree moving further and further out that seems to work for us. And like Robin had mentioned, finding those in-house ambassadors to connect with specific groups. If I've got a farmer at the table, I don't necessarily speak farmer, but they do. They know their own group. So kind of working with an individual so that they can become an ambassador, so that they can reach out to the other people in their groups. It helps build those early bridges. And I think it was Robin that had mentioned that safety and connection are key at these early coalition building stages. So at this stage, we are really focusing on that sense of safety and connection just within our local group.
Thank you, Becky. Very insightful. And I saw Dixie pointed out, yeah, making the plate bigger is the really good analogy. That's very helpful. Well, I'm going to circle back to Javane then and ask a second question. And maybe we've sort of dealt with the first two, so let's just go to the second one. How do you engage people in talking about the climate crisis and or mental health when those issues might be either polarizing or difficult to talk about in your community? So Javane, any thoughts on that? How do you talk about issues that could be polarizing, seem difficult to engage people in?
I think the best way to look at it is I say this all the time. A friend of mine once said, and it just struck me and it sits with me, and it really touches on what I've already mentioned and what Becky and Robin have mentioned too, is you can't treat the organization unless you treat the organism. So it's just so vital for people to understand their own place in that story. All of what we do is very human-centered. So allowing people to see how their own dysregulation might color, on the front end, just productivity, because we have a partnership with lots of individual or organizations, and they send their professionals into our space. And so that is always front of mind. But really, how are you showing up in all of the spheres of life if you are not taking care of you? So how are you as an organism prepared to be able to manage the stresses of daily life, the stresses of work, the stresses of home? And starting there, to me, really demystifies for folks the mental health component or the climate component. Fortunately, a lot of the people who are at the table within our task force, we've already been working through, their organizations have been working through increasing help-seeking behaviors. So that means we've got to be explicit around mental health hygiene. A lot of the folks we have at the table are first responders or work in government. And again, going back to kind of our anchor event, Florence, those are things where people have already opened up to those conversations. Where it might be challenging is kind of the noise from outside of the community, where there might be some harmful social norms or false narratives around what is meant by climate. So again, we just use our community experience as a connecting point, and just leverage what we have already been learning as a community over this past 7 years to be our North Star. So yeah, going back to our own experience in the community and the individual.
Thank you. I like, can't treat the organization unless you treat the organism. I hope I got that right. And really it's coming back to helping people deal with what they're experiencing personally, and that means what happens in their community. So you don't need the scientific jargon, et cetera, about climate change. It's what's happening within your community. Thank you very much. Got one more question for you, but we want to hear from the other two. So, and I know you have a time limit here. So Robin, your thoughts on any experiences you've had, any insights on how to engage people, talk with people that are uncomfortable talking about climate change and or mental health?
Well, our experience is similar to what Jevenet shared. Is we're seeing it real time. So we're seeing sea level rise in our community, and we're seeing the increasing storms, and we're seeing warmer Gulf temperatures, and we're living in it, and so you can deny a concept, you can deny lots of things, but you can't deny a reality. When people's shops are flooded, and it's similar to when Jevenet was talking about Florence. So I'm from Houston. We went through Hurricane Harvey, one of those storms that just sat there and caused tremendous, worst flooding ever. Neighborhoods that had never flooded ever are completely gone, had to be reimagined, rebuilt, redesigned, the whole city basically. And similar thing happened with Tarpon the past two storms we had. One was a water event, one was a wind event. So if people missed the water event, they had the wind event, the next week, a week later. And people, once again, having to leave their homes, and everything is ruined, and every piece of belonging that you have out at the curb. So that was like revisiting Harvey for me. So I found that re-traumatizing, and started thinking about how this ongoing thing is like this constant drain on the battery, on the energetic battery of the human system. We know could be reminiscent of a child who may live with an abusive parent who doesn't really know how mom or dad is going to come home that day. Are you going to be the loving? Are you going to be the abusive? Are you going to hurt me? Are you going to hug me? It's the same thing with the hurricane. So it's this poised of uncertainty that I think is very difficult to deal with, even when the hurricanes are out in the Gulf of Mexico. And it's coming. It may come here, it may cut to Louisiana, it could come south of it, could do anything, but it sits out there for a good long while to give us all extra anxiety. So it's those types of things that are they're undeniable. I have a brother who comes in from Kansas, not during hurricane season, but he has a place here. He comes in to visit, and he's a climate denier, you know. He's a scientist, you know, and it's like, so some things are kind of beyond my comprehension. But I think that as we experience these things more and more, it's becomes not only our reality, but it's like where it's the air we breathe. It's where we are with that. So I don't find that we're having as much of that deniability or denial here as we once might have.
Thank you, Robin. I like your analogy that it's basically a child has been abused, wondering what's going to happen tonight. You know, what's happened, you know, what's coming my way. And it's both climate anxiety, so to speak, and then it's just the traumas of experiencing these issues.
It's an anticipatory trauma.
Yeah.
And that is exhausting. So whether the hurricane never shows up here or not, we're all as a community completely exhausted, you know, by the whole thing.
Thank you. Becky, your thoughts on how to engage people, talk with people about the climate emergency and mental health issues that are related to those or unrelated to climate issues.
I'm glad that I get to follow up from Robin's comments, just because I am actively living in a red county that has a lot of denial around climate issues. So the approach is different here. I can't just say the words climate change. That's not going to get me very far, depending on the circles that I'm talking to. And so again, we got to take this hyper-focused, just talking about the specific weather events that the Walla Walla Valley experiences. And so we've had heat domes, we've had wildfire smoke, and it's easier to connect those experiences that we had with mental health issues. When we had 2 or 3 weeks of just choking wildfire smoke, people weren't able to get outside. They weren't able to walk their dogs. They weren't able to live the type of life that they want to, regardless of their political stripes. So it is reasonable to connect those experiences that people had with why we need to work as a community to address these issues. Mental health takes a hit when we've got heat domes. Mental health takes a hit when we've got wildfire smoke. Using community experiences as that connection point. I think Javane had said that. And that's really what it is. We are all connected through the climate of the community that we live in. And so regardless of our political leanings, we have this connection point. And to focus on that can help build those bridges, at least here in Walla Walla. And it's all about building that safety and connection. Interestingly enough, in the last 2 weeks, I had somebody who's part of our TCRN reach out, and there's concerns about federal funding. There's concerns about activities that you participate in if you're a federal grantee. And so I've had a couple people check in with me recently to ask, hey, I know we're working on this climate stuff. Is that reportable to the federal government? Is this something that I'm going to find myself on a list for? And so it's really important to safety and connection. You are safe when you are here with us. We are connected together, and this is a local issue that we are addressing locally. But it was a left field. I didn't expect to be asked,
Yeah.
are you reporting to the feds? No, we're not. This is local effort.
Thank you, Becky. And I think that the bigger picture there is protect everyone in the community and think about how you need to be protecting everybody to let them know, oh, nothing's being reported, et cetera, et cetera. It's just one of the many ways that people need to be protected. So thank you. I know we only have a few minutes left especially with Javane. So Javane, if you have just a few seconds, just offer your comments on your thoughts on how people can go and organize their own resilience network, the first few steps they can take in their community when none exists yet. Any thoughts you might have before you have to scoot?
Oh, absolutely. And it just goes back to connection and community. I always say that connection is our first survival response. And I think because it is our first survival response, it's going to come up in every way we try to start initiatives within a resilience collaborative or any sort of trauma-informed coalition. So, you know, as we work to connect people, we just have to be really, really focused on care. And when people know that that is the goal, is for us to go back to connection and care, then they want to be a part of it. And when people want to be a part of it, you are able to invite them in and give them part of that shared ownership. And that's an ongoing thing. Like I mentioned, we've been a task force for about 7 years. I've been with the task force for the last 5. So all through COVID, recovering from Florence. And what I find is we have to make sure people feel that shared ownership and that they are a part of the work, but also let them know that they are the innovators. This is not just under, what I learn in the task force as far as training goes, or the connections that I make with other professionals in the community. It's not just for me to leave there. How am I de-siloing based on, in my sector and the work that I do, how am I helping us to make more connections across sectors, across organizations, so that we can work together and still keep our mission of reducing and mitigating, preventing adverse childhood experiences, toxic stress, and trauma in our community. Really just going there, and allowing people to be owners of the innovations that we get to create as a group, I think is vital.
Thank you so much for that. Very insightful. Yeah, people have to own it. This has got to be a community-led initiative, to use that term. So thank you for taking the time today. I know you've got to scoot to the next one, but thank you very much for being here and for your thoughts. Robin, your thoughts, how have you been able to help other communities organize resilience networks? I know there's more Peace 4 groups forming out of the work you did. Any thoughts you can offer people about how they can begin to organize a local resilience network of some kind?
The other Peace 4 groups, each one formed out of a different area. Was a different source than ours did. Ours came out of city government. And but I would say the 2020 hindsight lessons for us were, first of all, we brought in the community from the very beginning, rather than bring in all the agencies and the people who have all this, perceived perceptions of power and all that, because that creates also a real chasm in connection. And even if someone is the head of an agency or whatever, they're still a human, they're still a community member, they have still experienced possibly different things that we all have, or many of us have. So it's kind of that great equalizer of trauma. But using the wisdom of the community to really propel our work. And the tendency is to create something very hierarchical, and also to bring in the community members when you need them, which is after you got everything all fixed up. You have everything just like you want it. And it's like, well, now we need to bring in the community. And many community members are like, now, really? Too little, too late. You have not brought them in. So, and there's a lot of wisdom, a lot of wonderful, wonderful, fruitful things come out of those community connections. So I would say that that's it. And knowing that people are going to come and go, but there's always going to be more people coming in. And you figure you're building up the buoyancy of the entire concept by having this, recycling. People go, they move, they come back, whatever. And understanding that that's a true treasure. is our community partners. They're the ones who are going to be here, in our, long term. I think that's the biggest wisdom I came out with this.
Thank you, Robin. That's very insightful. And let me just paraphrase if I was, you said it started with the government, but that's because you were part of the government at the time, so not everybody's part of the government.
But also one more thought, and that is that yes, I was a commissioner when I learned about the ACE study, it's like, but we've got to do this. But also if you're self-funded, I mean, we're open to grants. Becky and I received a MARC grant for our work, and that was wonderful. But if you're not funded by the government, it doesn't matter what the government does in some ways. It's like you bring in the support from the community rather than depending on a big, the state or some agency or someone, because you don't know what their deal is going to be ever. Even when things look, good from the 30,000-foot view, you don't know what tomorrow will bring. So I would say, make yourself impervious to those highs and lows of external politics by creating a resiliency that is, it's going to be there no matter what. And
Thank you.
give people opportunities to participate, to offer what they can do, because whether it's money or an idea or whatever. And now the wisdom is gone. I mean, pressing on.
Thank you. That's very insightful. We aren't going to get time to talk about funding today, but that's your approach to that is really important. And we want to have this same kind of discussion about funding these initiatives or supporting them, and whether funding is important down the road. But before we get into that, I want to hear from Becky one last time. And Becky, your thoughts, any thoughts and recommendations you have on how others who are thinking about forming a resilience network, how can they move forward? What should they be doing?
Sure, thanks. And I love Robin's comments. That is great. And I'm going to echo what you had spoken about. Finding those pockets of community members that frequently aren't engaged. Bob's got a great playbook for forming TCRNs on the CTIP website, which I highly recommend. That gives you a play-by-play on different groups that you might want to include. Of course, we look at nonprofits, we look at local governments, we look at the service providers and the typical people around the table. But I also really like to work with high school students. We have a local alternative high school here, Lincoln Alternative High School, that was the subject of the documentary Paper Tigers. They still have an engaged group of kids. These kids work with our TCRN. I'm interested in hearing what their priorities are. When they're driving the priorities, we know the next group to work with. We should also be working with senior centers. We should be looking for those pockets of people who have wisdom or have lots of experience or lots of fresh ideas, things that get us outside of our typical structures that we're used to working with. If you want innovation, working with some of the groups that often don't make the list, providing a seat at the table, that is the way to really increase engagement and help people own the issue locally. So that's my hot tip. Go to the high schools, go to the senior centers.
Thank you very, very much. Yeah, it's the grassroots people. It's people on the ground doing things. It's not just the organizations but if my experience has been if you get the different populations, different people involved, then the agencies and nonprofits will participate, because that's a way for them to engage with these folks. So it's a different way of starting. But you start each of these TRCNs in different ways. It really depends on your community, the status of your community, what you've experienced, how the trust levels, et cetera. So keep that in mind. You have to sort of think that through. Thank you all for offering these wonderful comments. I hope this is helpful for everybody. Let's just have, I think Javane had to leave. I don't know if Robin's still here, but we'll just take a few questions. If anybody has any questions, can you just raise your hand or let me know, and we'll just have a few, and then we're going to move on to the last topic for the community practice. Anybody have a question? Key comment?
Just wondering, what is a realistic time span for having a healthy, robust TRCN?
If I can paraphrase it, how long does it take to sort of get to a point where you feel like it's really running very well? So Becky or Robin, if you're still there, any thoughts, reactions?
We're still ongoing. So I think we already had community connections and networking, so it was fairly easy for us to jump in on the climate conversation. I would say I didn't feel like this was coming together at least for 6 months, and even now it's still in the ether. We're still getting our feet underneath us. I'd give it a year to really feel good.
Robin?
We're 15 years in, and every day it's like it's still a wonderment as to how it expands or what the fruits of this is, and it's very much a work in progress. The whole thing is just a process. It's going to evolve. It's going to look differently year after year. Different people will naturally gravitate to you and blossom, and then it just, for me, it's a very, it's very much a living thing. And the organism continues to develop. We can create facets in it that might not have existed before, nuance, but it basically, it's, I think this is our work. I think this is what we're supposed to be doing now. So I think that things come in when the work what's supposed to happen gets fertilized by people who are doing this work, it can grow. But it's not my job to say, I want this branch to grow now, and then I think I want some fruit over here. And then, you know what, I'll plant another tree over here. You kind of have to be present with what is and responsive and nimble. Bob, I have to go, but thank you so much for convening this and all the work that you're doing. Thank you, and good to be
Thank you,
with
Robin.
everybody.
Good to see you all. Good to see you.
Bye-bye.
Any other final comments, at least for Becky? And let me also just offer that, what Robin just said is right on target. These TRCNs are constant adaptation. We have to keep learning, and especially when you think about the fact that the climate crisis is going to keep getting worse. Therefore, you'll have more surprises. Oh, a storm that usually doesn't stop, bam, stops right over us for a long time, et cetera. All that kind of stuff is going to happen. The science can't predict what's coming our way now. So you just have to keep adapting. But any other final questions for Becky? Well, thank you for sharing your thoughts. And if you have other questions, please let us know. You can put them in chat, or you can send it to the TR email, and we'll pass them on to the three speakers today. And hopefully they'll get a chance to respond to them in a second. So in a while. We want to now sort of shift based on your experience here. Actually, let me just do one thing. I want to share the ladder of engagement with you and see if this helps at all summarize a little bit of it's a model, a way to think about how to organize and build a TRCN. And I'm just going to do this briefly, but we can talk about it later. The first step, if you're thinking about starting a TRCN, is to sort of do an assessment of what's your current conditions, what's your starting point in your community. So evaluate if and how wellness and resilience are being addressed, what organizations, what people are engaged, et cetera. And we've talked about this, I'm just sort of summarizing it with the ladder of engagement. Create a mission and a vision of success, your own. What do you think would be successful? And this means determine what you want to achieve and what will be different given that compared to current conditions. How will this be different? And then build your own case for forming a TRCN, which means sort of highlighting, what are the benefits of this? Well, we get multi-sectoral engagement, we get stronger relationships, we get empowered residents, sort of lay that out, and then try to identify and contact 3 to 10 potential co-sponsors or co-founders, founders of the TRCN that you know of. And partly, often that might start with talking with 1 or 2 or 3 people and asking them who else they think might be interested. So you might not know the 10 people or 8 people or whatever, but others that you start talking with and you have dinner with them, you have coffee, tea, whatever it might be, just sort of bring that out and reach out to as many as you can, introduce the vision and mission, discuss the different roles different people can play in different activities, and help them realize the benefits. And then invite everyone to some fun, and I want to introduce or underscore fun, kickoff meetings. Make it fun. And it might be start with a Zoom call and then go with a real call, an in-person meeting. But make it fun. Bring some food, et cetera. Have a really engaging discussion, allow people to get to know each other, have fun doing that, and then assess that vision and mission and see what people want to think. Well, what do we want to achieve? What do you want to achieve? And then once you've got a small group, you might have 3, 6 people that say, okay, I'll start with the initial steering committee or whatever you want to call it. Seek some small wins and start small and promote those wins when you get them. So you might want to do a few pilot projects. So for example, how do we bring people together and create those social connections in a community? Let's start in this neighborhood and hold a get-together of some kind, maybe a food sharing event or some other sort of event. Decide how it went, evaluate it, see what worked, and then before you scale up to a whole bunch of other stuff, sort of just get some pilots underway and see how they work, but then promote that success and help other people. That'll draw other people in. Then you might want to set some metrics and begin to measure and keep adapting, as we just talked about, as you go. Continually sort of track your progress, continue to learn, and ensure that what you're doing is effective and widely embraced. You might have something effective, but not many people engage in it or don't like it. It's behavioral health, and I'm not interested in that. I want to do, resilience. Okay, that's great, but not behavioral health, whatever it might be. And then ultimately, what you really want to do is try to create a community-led and a community-centric culture, as we've just heard from the 3 presenters, and I'm sure all of you talk about too. Keep expanding participation. Again, as Robin said, and as everybody knows, people will come and go. Their lives change, their work changes, things change. But just keep emphasizing that we want to learn what you think is important. We want to engage all of you in this work. How can we do that? What do you think is most important to build resilience for the climate emergency and for many other kinds of stresses that people experience? So this is just a model. We'll send this out afterwards, just that to all of you, so you can keep it. The 8 stages of the ladder of engagement. Any comments, quick thoughts on that? Okay, if you have any, just put them in chat. So in the last time we have together, I want to now discuss future communities of practice. When we asked people about a month ago how they were doing in forming a community, their TRCN, we got different feedback when we asked what would be most helpful in as a community practice. So we did today's community practice based on that feedback, but we would like to just have a brief discussion from all of you to get your feedback on sort of 3 different approaches that might make sense based on what we heard from people. The first is to go back and offer an 8, maybe 10-week general education series that has a set agenda every week. And we've done this in the past 3 or 4 times through the community practice. So just people can learn about the different elements of it, but we don't go into any depth on any particular skills or issues. That's one, sort of a general education, 8 to 10 week kind of program. A second approach would be a skills training program where we dive into specific skills each week. And the skills that we dive into are identified by all of you, the participants, 2 to 3 weeks in advance. So we might say, I'm now struggling with how to communicate about this issue. So can we talk about how to communicate about mental health or whatever it might be? That becomes the focus, is skills training. And the third is sort of a general mutual support kind of network or approach where you all just come and share what you're doing, what you're involved with. You raise certain issues and we have discussions about it. That's how we started this particular community practice, more along the line. So one is, again, a general education, 8-week, 10-week session. The second is much more focused on skills development with specific areas. And 3, sort of just a mutual support area. And the other component to think about that is we could now do these bi-weekly, or we could remain doing them monthly, once a month. So let me stop there and just ask for your feedback, and please just sort of offer your thoughts, just unmute yourself and offer your thoughts on what makes most sense to you for the next 3 to 6 months.
So we're all at different levels of preparedness. And so for some, I think the general education is going to be valuable. For some, skill is valuable. And for others, I have some specific questions about what I'm doing that it would be great to have some feedback from those of you who are more experienced. So I don't know, it's kind of like what our speakers today, it's an ongoing thing, and trying to nail it down to one thing is going to be tricky because we're all in different places.
Thanks, Rob. Yeah, that's the challenge. And maybe we can find a way to mix that up. But before we sort of dive into that a little bit more, any other thoughts? What would be most helpful to each of you? Let me ask it a different way. Is today's session, what we've done so far, has that been very helpful with doing more of these kinds of sessions where we pose some questions to people in the practitioners in the field and get feedback and then have a discussion? Is that helpful? See, somebody has a raised.
Yeah, I think it's helpful. I also feel like maybe if there was a little more organization to it, like maybe if we had sort of an action worksheet with some of those elements that you shared earlier on it. And I guess maybe accountability can help me move more intentionally. So if there was like an action sheet that had these elements on it, and what are you doing in this element? What are you doing in this element? Not to make it labor intensive, just to make us self-assess regularly and then share our progress with each other, and then even maybe share our own barriers and resources with each other might be helpful, because we're all approaching it maybe in a different way or with different kinds of partners or whatever. But the sharing definitely resparks the energy, and it also gives new ideas and approaches and, layers to it. Those are my thoughts.
Thank you.
And maybe giving off, maybe we could send questions before the meeting. So in that way, if you have a panelist, they could have some time to think about it or find resources. Or a topic, maybe having the topic, and then if we have any questions, we could, like I said, send it before.
So if I'm understanding this correctly, we identify as a group the topic we'll focus on, but then ask people to send questions that they want to have asked around the topic. Is that correct?
That is correct. Thank you.
Good. Thank you.
Hi, if I'm hearing what Dixie had suggested, I almost imagine us using the 8 stages of engagement and looking at that as a checklist and seeing kind of like where we are. It's like, okay, did we move up the ladder and, you know, and how we're progressing as a way to get us kind of along the road, you know, or our process or progress, and then report out to each other kind of where we are, like you said, what challenges and what other ideas maybe we have that we think is working or will be work or will work. So yeah, that's my input.
Thank you.
Yes, because, you know, one of the things this prompted me to do was do a search in our whole area of who's doing climate work in general, because that's not how I came into this. I came into this because of behavioral health. And so I'm finding, you know, there's a whole county group and there's, you know, so there's all these other groups that can be engaged. And so looking at that ladder, I think was very helpful. And also seeing it as being able to assess progress in our own practice, you know, what we're doing personally, because I put it in the chat, but like our behavioral health system here, not the private behavioral health system, but the publicly funded, is very much like a big business. And I don't see them coming to this table. I don't see inviting them to start adding climate onto their list of things to deal with, including crisis stabilization and stuff like that. But I think once something's well established, and they see a method, I think that getting their engagement would be good. And I think the idea of starting with community really at the grassroots level is so important, because that's exactly what happens. Groups come together and there's a plan, and then the community is invited as an afterthought. And I think that's where we fail every time. Thank you.
Yeah, let me just follow up on that real quick, and I want to hear from others. There's a difference between community-led and community-based. And the successful programs are community-led. And what that means is a community-based initiative is often run by a nonprofit or a government agency that gets some funding, starts a program. They might invite community members to participate. They get feedback from them. But that nonprofit or government agency is the decision maker, because they have the funding that they're responsible for. They've got to tell the funder what they did. Community-led is very different. Communities went what we've been talking about today, that the community is in charge. They make the decisions. So if funding ends, or you never even get funding, very much of it, like Peace for Tarpon has not focused on much funding over time, it doesn't matter if the funding ends, the community feels ownership for it and it continues. Because it's their initiative. So that's really important. Sometimes it's really important to have a community-based initiative that starts that way. Local governments or nonprofit get some funding or invest some time, staff time, to make it happen. But they know that the issue is to organize and get the community to own it. Then it can succeed over time. So both can be effective, but ultimately what you're aiming for is community-led. And those are the ones that we have been successful over time. Other comments, other thoughts on?
Yeah. I was thinking what might help me is to get to know a few people who are coming to the calls over time. So maybe some portion, it could be a panel like what we just did, but then half an hour would be 6 people, you know, breaking down into groups of 6 on a regular basis, where I get to check in with folks from North Carolina or whatever on, you know, on my progress. It doesn't have to be all of us at the same level, but just to create some accountability. It's not just attending a call and, you know, taking back what I can. So that was a thought that I had. Yeah, and maybe following the 8 stages model might be useful to do that with, like how you doing on X, Y, or Z. So it's a little bit more intimate within a group of 18 or 20, whatever.
Thanks, Bill. Very, very helpful. Other thoughts? So in chat, Stephanie also said that she'd actually just beginning to get to understand this, so she'd like more of that training program, the education program. So sort of like Reb said, that there's different people are all over the place and would have different needs. Anything else that any thoughts, any different way to help you all move forward in this work that you want to offer or share?
I'm looking on the website and I'm not seeing the ladder approach. Can you tell me where I would find that?
Yeah, and actually even the checklist we talked about, there are handbooks that prospective TRCN gets a handbook, an emerging TRCN gets a different handbook, and this information is in those handbooks, and there are checklists in there, but you have to take the time to read through them.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and they're thick. We know that's an issue.
Thank you.
But we'll also, after this, we'll send out the letter of engagement just as a PowerPoint to everybody. Other thoughts? Christian or Jesse, if you want to add anything before we close for the day?
I think just the wisdom that you all share is so valuable to us as we figure out in this changing atmosphere how to best support the incredible work that you all do. And so just really appreciate it. And to the question about the ladder, really simply, Bob, if you don't mind just sharing those slides, we can also post that alongside the recording. So that way, if you want to refer back to those, again, they are in the handbooks that you can find on the website, but recognize how that can be helpful too.
Great. Christian?
Yeah, I just have a lot of gratitude for everyone being on the call today and being willing to share and organize around these really important issues. So thank you all for being here.
Hey. Is Christy still there?
Yeah, I'm still here. Yeah, just
Yeah.
echoing what everyone said. Gratitude for just the different amount of thoughts and approaches to this work. And we have a lot to think about for the core team of how to move forward. So thank you all.
Your cat is beautiful.
Thank you. She is beautiful.
Everyone should have a beautiful cat, dog, some sort of animal too. But we'll take the feedback now that we've gotten and try to figure out the best way. I think what I'm hearing is it would be helpful to start the 8 or 10 week program, but maybe we also maybe we do that once a month, and then every other week we offer a different approach that's more skills oriented and connecting and getting to know people oriented. So that's what I think we'll start to try to figure out. And if any of you have thoughts on that, please send it to us afterwards. I see that Christian put where you can get the handbooks that you all should be able to have. And also there's another handbook that you would see there that's just on what is a public health approach to mental wellness and resilience. Look into that one also. Again, it's a lot of reading, but if you want the details, if you want charts, if you want those kind of graphics, that's where you'll find that information, because it'll help you get a sense of how is this different than behavioral health, mental health, although again, behavioral health can support this work, but it's different. That building mental wellness and resilience is really about building those social connections and all the things we've heard about today. So with that, unless there's anything else for the good of the order, anybody wants to share?
Thank you.
Great. We will wish you all a good week, and we expect to get the slides, the video of this and the slide I showed probably tomorrow, and then right soon after that we'll send out an email saying here's what we're going to do with the community practice in the future. So we wish you all the best. Thank you all for all the wonderful work you do and your interest and commitment to this work. And we look forward to staying in touch and more work down the road pretty soon. Take care, everybody. Stay well.